If you don't know me, I'm Mo Reza, Mohammed Reza, Joy Charlotte, and Gary Arvagast is my engineer. We have teamed up with Access Point after the Access Point acquisition. So Robert Buffa runs the voice piece of it throughout the United States. He's the VP. And Michael Goff, my boss, runs the enterprise channel side of it. Joyce is my voice executive. So anything voice related, whether it's over the network or standalone, please engage Joyce. And of course, engage my engineer, Gary, and myself as well. If you need multi-site broadband, MPLS, DIA, not just domestic, but global, you are about to hear some great stuff. I'm not kidding. 3,500 access vendor, over 600 POPs. I can take a remote location, whether it's a domestic or international, and connect to one of our nearest POP and backhaul it to your location. Big pipe, 10 gig, 20 gig, 50 gig, 100 gig. As you know, we own the fiber in Europe too, but I'm not gonna take it away from Joyce and Gary. Joyce can tell you some of the voice piece, then hand it over to Gary for the technical side.
Hello. So those of you who have not worked with me in the past, or if you have, you know I'm been involved with the hosted world for probably 9.5, 10 years. I'm going on for quite some time. So I'll be working very closely with Mo on anything from POTS lines, SIP trunking, PRIs, hosted BroadSoft with all the bells and whistles. So what Mo and I would like to offer to everybody here today is if you're looking for a more direct one-on-one either web or on-site presentation to go over all the voice products, please just see us before you leave today and we'll get you on the schedule.
I've got an agenda up here. I picked some specific things to talk about to this group. May not cover everything we do, but I thought there were some things you might find particularly interesting. I'll probably move quickly because I have a lot of information to cover. So either afterwards or during, if you have questions, I'll do my best to get answers for you. The GTT advantage, it's the global reach that Mo mentioned, the comprehensive cloud networking, and we have an outstanding client experience. And those are a lot of words. I'm going to try to breathe some life into that for you. So who are we? Because many of you may not have done business before with GTT or heard of GTT. We're headquartered in McLean, Virginia. We have approximately 3,000 employees in 60 offices worldwide. We service in over 140 countries. We reach 6 different continents. Our revenue growth has been off the charts, and I'll show you that in just a moment. And right now, we're about a $2 billion company. And we're also publicly traded. So I won't read this to you, but to do business with these type of top providers in all these different fields means you have to be doing something right. If you look at our growth trajectory, you can see that over a period of time, we've increased 71% on the revenue and 86% on the adjusted EBITDA. Part of that was our recent acquisition of Interroute in Europe. It almost doubled our revenues, but it gave us an expanded reach and fiber that we did not have access to before. So we're international, we're public, we're about a $2 billion company, and you're about to learn a lot more. We like to say any application, anywhere, anytime, because of our global reach and our relationships. And if you're wanting to know what we do from the standpoint of the different services, they're pretty much all listed here. The benefit that you'll see with GTT is our ability to take these and combine them together into a solution for the customer. But if you want an individual service, we do that as well. If you want to use somebody else's voice, but you want our bandwidth, we're pleased to do that. If you want us to do both, we're pleased to do that as well. So let's talk about our Tier 1 global network. And it is a Tier 1 global network, not just domestic. As this points out, we're in 600 plus POPs around the world. We'll talk more about the Tier 1 internet in a moment. In co-location facilities, I mentioned 140 countries. Today we manage over 200,000 devices worldwide. Most of what we provide is on a managed services basis. Customer can, of course, provide their own customer equipment if they want to manage their routers. But if we provide them, we're going to management. That's part of what we do. Same thing with SD-WAN. Equally important is the 3,500 plus regional partners. So many of our competitors have spent a lot of their time and money in running fiber out to buildings and cities. And we don't disagree that that's beneficial and necessary, but that's almost becoming a commodity item these days with so many players in that field. So what GTT decided to do was establish relationships with all these Type 2 providers that are out there, or as many as possible. We have over 3,500 in our deck, which means that's what allows us to get to almost everywhere, any application, anytime, anywhere. Because we value those relationships, we know how to manage those relationships. It could be broadband service for 30, 40, 50, 100 locations. That's fine, we have the relationships on the broadband. Could be fiber service, we have those relationships. And it's when you pull all of these things together, we think that brings the biggest value, not only to your ability to sell, but also to your customers. So let's talk about the Tier 1 global internet capability we have, a networking capability. We peer on AS 3257 worldwide. Most of our peering is done privately, as this says, and we have over 15 terabits of global peering capacity. And peering usage roughly amounts to 50% of our network. But it was something on this slide that I wanted to point out. Second bullet under roughly. Roughly 1/3 of all internet routes are broadcast by our ASN on a daily basis. So if you look worldwide and you look at the ranking of global internet providers, GTT will be in the top 5. Again, maybe some things you didn't know about us. But it's a substantial investment, and that's the other thing that I'm trying to communicate, right? What we've invested into our network with the POPs and the peering, et cetera. I'm going to move on to voice. POTS, and you'd say, well, that's not very dynamic, and it's not very high tech, and it's not. But in our marriage, our partnership with Access Point, they bring to us the ability to provide POTS lines. And you might say, well, what's so exciting about that? They've recently signed contracts of $60,000 and $80,000 for just POTS service. And I'm not suggesting this becomes the meat and potatoes of everything you do, because there's a lot of other stuff going on out there. But what I am saying is, when you're speaking with your customers, and do you talk about POTS lines? You still need them, right? You've got elevators, right? You've got emergency lines and whatever, and SIP to TDM just really doesn't work, because when the power goes out, so does their capabilities. Now maybe they can use cell on some of that these days, right? But nonetheless, it's just one more item in our bucket that we can help you with. I'm going to talk more about SIP than hosted PBX. Our friends at Access Point are bringing us some really exciting things on hosted PBX that we weren't doing, but I wanted to spend more time on SIP today. One SIP trunk can support DIDs from multiple locations, even countries. And that goes back to talk about what our capabilities are internationally, not just domestically. We support multiple configurations. As you can see, we can do SIP to TDM PRI. We can do a SIP to DSOs or POTS, if you will. We can provide service to a single IPBX, or we can provide service to a centralized PBX. There'd be no surprise there, but we do all of those things. So this is our Sonus and BroadSoft network as it looks today. We provide SIP over our Sonus network. BroadSoft is our hosted PBX platform. Access Point has BroadSoft servers in New York and I think Los Angeles, or East Coast, West Coast, right? We'll be incorporating all of that into our network and those capabilities. But on the SIP side, you can see, and we've added a couple, they're in red here, I think they've already been added. We have the international capability for SIP as well. So when you look at our global coverage and capability, I've got a spreadsheet that I work from that tells me what I can and can't do in every country. I can provide toll-free service in China, but I can't provide DIDs, right? So you have to look at everything country by country, especially when you go internationally. But we provide local numbers in 61 countries, portability in 37. In some countries I can provide new numbers, but I can't port numbers. We provide emergency services in over 30 countries, toll-free in 124, toll-free porting in 78, and long-distance termination fixed and mobile in 230 countries. On the SIP trunking side, as you would expect, we have redundant redundant Sonos servers that we use for our SIP platform, and every SIP customer is attached to 2 different of those servers in our network for backup and security. On our SIP trunking network diversity for the customer service, this would be a single site, and it shows primary and failover. We call the failover a shadow trunk in our world. If we're providing the customer shadow service, meaning they have the ability to receive 2 circuits that would carry SIP trunks or SIP sessions, there's not a charge from GTT for the failover to the shadow trunk. Now you have to pay for the access, but we'll provide SIP over our MPLS because those SIP servers sit on our MPLS backbone. We'll provide SIP over the GTT internet network, or we'll provide SIP over the customer's provided internet access. So for example, in this case, their primary circuit might be a GTT MPLS. Their secondary circuit at the same site might be their own provided internet. And again, as long as that shadow trunk is at that same site, we don't charge anything for the failover. There's no additional charge. And this slide is just to show that we'll provide diversity between sites. So when we're going from site A to site B, we also call it shadow trunking. Again, nothing new that you haven't seen before. There is a charge for the failover to the second site. But again, when both trunks, both accesses are at the same site, there's not a charge. We have SIP failover remote call forwarding. And that is more for single site access, right? And it's a proactive as opposed to a reactive. The customer determines ahead of time where they want their calls forwarded in the event of a failure, because it could be in their PBX, right? It could be in the last mile if they have a single circuit. And those calls will automatically be forwarded when we can't speak to the customer. We do that out of the SIP platform. So that capability is very available as well. This is a diagram that goes through that. I'm going to pass on that, just because it's a little busy. So the thing to remember about SIP is our international capabilities, our ability to deliver SIP over multiple types of access, and our ability to deliver SIP with TDM handoff, with a SIP handoff. MPLS. Somebody's been ringing the bell that MPLS is dead. I don't believe MPLS is dead. I believe MPLS is changing, right? And we'll talk more about that when we get to SD-WAN. But I wanted to point out a couple things in our MPLS. Number one, we don't charge for class of service. You get MPLS from it, class of service comes standard. You don't pay any additional. The percentages in our profile only come into play when there's congestion. So let's say, for example, you were under the profile 1, 5010, 2020, and standard was the only traffic on the network at that time. Standard could use all of the available bandwidth. It would only be held to 20%. If there was congestion, then all the percentages kick in. The other thing we do that's a little different, and I put internet on here as well, is we not only do bursting, and I know bursting would not be anything new to you, but what about aggregate committed data rate? What about the ability to burst and also have aggregate billing? And let me give you an example. Let's say that you have 3 internet circuits, 1 gig each, and let's just say they're East Coast, Central, and West Coast. But the customer's data flow in and out of that internet circuit is sporadic, right? It's not always the same every day. A may be higher than B today, and C may be higher than B tomorrow, right? So what they really want is a 300 meg commit across those 3 circuits. That's aggregate billing. They can burst on any of those up to the full gig, so they're not limited. The bursting can come from any of the sites, and the 300 meg could be all at one site, or it could be spread between different sites. It's just another way to look at the business in terms of what your customers are doing, how they can maximize their spend, but still have the flexibility to meet whatever their needs may be. And we do lag, and it's a managed service, and we can bundle internet onto our MPLS, probably things that you already know. But I thought the aggregate committed data rate was a little different.
Additional charge if we are bursting from one location to the other?
No, if it's in the aggregate billing, it doesn't matter which location they burst from. But if they go above the commit, there's going to be billing for those additional megs. Yeah. Okay, SD-WAN. SD-WAN is a favorite subject today, and the field's pretty crowded, right? Everybody seems to have a little different path to take. and there's even more, right? So GTT decided to go with VeloCloud. And there's some differences in what we do. I'm just stepping through this quickly here. There's some differences in what we do than what some of our competitors do with Velo, and I'm going to talk about that. But one of the benefits in SD-WAN is, instead of the DSCP codes, which we can honor, if the customer has an MPLS network, they're transitioning to SD-WAN and they've already got their DSCP code set up for their real-time traffic and whatever the case may be, we can honor those with Velo, that's no problem. But you have the ability to look at the layer 7. You have ability to look at the application and make a decision of which application gets which preference, even if it's in the same class. We'll talk a little bit about VeloCloud and remediation and forward error correction and things that it does to make life really good for the customer. But I could have one real-time service that you want remediated as a customer, but another real-time service that you don't. Again, tremendous amount of flexibility when you look at SD-WAN and VeloCloud. So there's 3 components. You probably know this if you know anything about VeloCloud. There's an edge device, there's a gateway, and there's a management platform called the orchestrator, right? The edge device sits on the customer prem. The gateway sits in the provider's network. That's us, maybe. Maybe you're using a VeloCloud provider that's using VeloCloud gateways from VeloCloud. We own and operate our own, as well as the orchestrator. But one important difference, the gateways in our network sit on our MPLS backbone. So I'm going to show you a chart here, a graph here in a few minutes that shows you that when you go from the edge device to the gateway with an IPsec tunnel, and each IPsec tunnel goes to 2 gateways for redundancy. But now I have location A and location B, and they're served by different gateways. How does the traffic transport between the 2 gateways? In the GTT world, they transport over the MPLS network. They don't transport over the top. And there's some real benefits to that, and I'll get to that in just a couple minutes. This is just really to say we can provide internet, we can provide broadband, we can provide a WAN service like MPLS, we can provide a 3G, 4G, hopefully 5G here in the not too distant future, and we have all of those available. So in this particular case, these guys in gray right here, there would be the gateways. Those would be the items that sit on the GTT MPLS backbone. So let's think about that. Let's say that your customer, and the largest VeloCloud Edge device that I'm aware of today supports 5 gig of throughput, right? And we handle everything from the smallest to the largest they have. But what if I have a data center that has 10 gig? How am I going to accommodate that 10 gig data center and incorporate it into my Velo, into my SD-WAN, if everything's over the top? Well, if the gateways sit on your MPLS network like they do at GTT, that data center becomes a node on the MPLS network. So you can have a combination of SD-WAN sites and straight MPLS sites and still maintain that fully meshed network, remain the data flowing from that data center out to the gateways on that separate VRF, right? That segment that's designated in the layer 3 world that keeps that data private for that customer. And then when it hits the gateway, it's IPsec tunnel back to the edge device. Well, let's take another example. Let's talk about cloud. Let's talk about Amazon Web Services or Google or Azure, right? Customer would like to have more private access, and he wants everybody, or she wants everybody, right, to have access to it. It's just another node on the GTT MPLS network. We set up an MPLS port. We work through the Equinix Cloud Exchange. So you could have multiple cloud providers, right, at the same location. And again, all locations that you'd want to have access, whether they be SD-WAN or whether they be MPLS. So when I said, somebody's out there ringing the bell saying MPLS may be dead, I think MPLS is changing. And this is one of the ways it's changing depending upon how you set up your SD-WAN. So this is a big difference that you'd see from us. Customer has access to the VeloCloud orchestrator. If you haven't seen a demo of the orchestrator, we'd be happy to do one for you to show you the kind of information the customer sees about their network. because that information allows them to manage what they're doing. And we all know you can't manage what you can't measure, right? So with the VeloCloud Orchestrator, the access they have to all of the data about their network is really quite impressive. And again, if you haven't seen it, let Mo know, and we'd be happy to schedule a webinar for you and show you that. And customer has complete access to that. We don't hold anything back in terms of the information they can see. Application optimization. Let's talk about that in SD-WAN a little bit, and another reason we chose VeloCloud. So one of the real benefits of SD-WAN, of course, is that you can have two circuits in an active standby. It could be an internet and a broadband. It could be a broadband and a 3G, 4G. We see a lot of that in the retail world, right? They want it in an active standby because they don't want two circuits up and running and paying for it at the same time, but they want the failover. But let's talk about the active-active world for a moment. The Velo system uses something called Dynamic Multipath Optimization, DMPO. And essentially what that means is it's looking at every data stream that goes out on a packet-by-packet basis. Not a session, but an individual packet. And it will, because it's got that IPsec tunnel to the gateway, be able to look at things like latency and packet loss, right? That sort of stuff, right? Jitter. And be able to determine which of the two circuits is best for that data. So if I had a VoIP phone connected to the back of my VeloCloud Edge device, and I could see that the voice traffic was going over one of the two circuits, and I unplugged that circuit from the WAN side, your voice call would not be lost, would not be interrupted. You'd never know it happened. And the reason is it's a packet-by-packet inspection, right? It's not looking at the whole conversation or bursts of the conversation. It's looking at each individual packet. So it does the remediation from the failover. It also does remediation on a packet-by-packet basis. This packet's better going out this circuit. This packet's better going out that circuit. Symbols them at the other end, right? So it's all together and all looking well. And then, should one of the two circuits fail, it will also do forward error correction. So it does everything it possibly can to ensure that the integrity of the customer's data makes it to the other end. So your traditional over-the-top SD-WAN is this. It's all internet, right? No matter where you're going. Many of our VeloCloud competitors, right, use this example. They have the gateways, but everything, again, is attached to the internet, right? So even gateway-to-gateway traffic is over the internet. You notice I have a green line down there for MPLS. There's no green line there. If you were to look at the GTT MPLS network, you'd see a lot of green, right? Because it is MPLS no matter where it's going. But now we add in VeloCloud. And the gateways, the VCG on the right and the VCG on the left, you see that green line connected between the two? Again, it's sitting on our MPLS backbone and the traffic is traveling over our MPLS network between gateways. That's what makes the cloud another node on the MPLS network. That's what makes or helps make that data center that has too big a circuit, maybe for SD-WAN today, but they want it as part of their network and they want to keep everything fully meshed. This isn't a hub and spoke as you might see with some other SD-WAN providers, right? And again, the MPLS traffic is privatized because it's on that separate VRF. And if you're not familiar with that term, it's really quite simple to VLAN in the layer 2 Ethernet world, right? It's just the logical segmentation of that traffic, so it only applies to that given customer. All right.
Gary, a question on the SD-WAN VeloCloud Edge devices. Can you inventory-wise, how the GTT handles it? Can you elaborate on that?
I'm sorry.
SD-WAN Edge devices?
Yes.
The inventory part of it.
Yes.
How GTT handles it?
Yes.
The partner needs to know.
Okay. We buy directly from VeloCloud. We maintain some inventory for sale and also for service. And whatever levels the company decides is appropriate based upon customers and needs and flow and whatever, then we would go back to VeloCloud when we need to acquire additional boxes. We don't sell the boxes to the customer. We maintain them. It's a managed service. We want the customer and you to hold us accountable for the whole solution. Is that what you wanted me to mention, Mo?
Yeah, so for example, let's say things do go wrong sometimes, and you got an SD-WAN deployed a week later, something happened with the box. How quickly can GTT replace that box?
Yeah, it's generally going to be next day. But you bring a good point, Mo. If you have the need, we can also set them up in a high availability mode, where you actually have 2 VeloCloud boxes on a site. You put 2 switches in front of them. You have 2 WAN connections right into the switches. The switches are cross-hashed to the VeloCloud Edge devices. The VeloCloud Edge devices are both up to date on what's happening. One is active, one is standby. The failover happens, you never know what happened. I mean, we would know what happened because we'd get an alarm, but the customer would not recognize a data change. Well, I think what it means most of all, a couple of things. One, we've made a tremendous investment. So you're dealing with a tier 1 provider. We're not relying upon someone else's peering, right, to get to where we need to go. We're peering ourselves. And I think it also speaks to the substantiveness of our network, how substantial it is, right? If 1/3 of the ASNs are traversing our network on a daily basis, that shows you our breadth of service and also shows you how confident others are and the stability of our service.
What makes GTT top 5 carrier?
It's really, that's a measurement of the, look, I think we're the top 1 carrier. But what really makes it top 5 is they're measuring the amount of traffic you handle, right? The number of ASNs. So it's the amount of traffic in that measurement. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the client for just a couple minutes, right? Because they are the most important. You are our client. They are also our client, your client first, right? And we need to have a fast and focused and flexible model to work with them, and we do. We have a portal for the customer to go through. They would use this same portal to get to the orchestrator on the SD-WAN side. And I don't want to cut that customer experience short because it's so very important. But these are the things we really talked about today: the global reach, the diverse cloud networking, the agile model that we have with the different accesses we use and the different ways we'll provide service. We have that expertise in managed services and SD-WAN. And it's the simplicity, speed, and agility. That's a motto in our company. And that's part of what's important to you. I mean, there could be just words, but we truly try to live that every day through the customer's experience. Doesn't mean we're perfect. Doesn't mean we never make a mistake. But I promise you, you can get us on the phone and we'll help when there's an issue. Number one is it allows us to accommodate a mixture of services for almost any customer, right? You can come to us, we can look at it all for you. Number two, it's a diverse issue. If you have multiple carriers that you have the ability to work with, and customer needs a diverse routing, or they want diverse carriers for whatever reason, we have an extensive ability to look at that. Okay? Well, we'll be here. We'll entertain questions if you have them, and thank you so much for your time and this opportunity.